So we've learned that when a problem arises regarding network management, there are some ways or steps that might help to uh, divide those problems into different aspects. Okay, so it shows the orthogonal dimensions or the network management dimensions, which are management interoperability, management subject, management layer, management life cycle, management process and organization, and management function. So let's talk about management interoperability. Okay, management is a distributed application that involves different systems, management applications, and network devices. For management to work, those systems must communicate with each other for management purposes. Um, in other words, they need to be interoperable. Okay, they need to communicate. They need to understand each other. A central aspect of network management deals, and therefore, with how management interoperability between different systems can be ensured. For a managing system and a managed device to interoperate, it is not sufficient for the system to be merely connected. Uh, they need to speak with the same management language. Okay, for example, between the manager and the agent. Okay, here's the scenario. When the manager sends a management message, the agent needs to understand the message. Okay, for example, the agent needs to understand that the manager is trying to make a specific request and must be able to provide a response that the manager can understand. Okay, the agent needs to support the functionality that the manager requests in the management message and that the manager requires to do its job. Okay, and when the management messages involve the exchange of management information about the device, there needs to be a mutual understanding between manager and agent about how information is represented and how it needs to be interpreted. Okay, management interoperability can hence be divided into several subdimensions, and these are the first one is communication viewpoint, which dealing with what kinds of messages are exchanged between parties engaging in management communications. Second is function viewpoint. It is about dealing with the management functions that either party can provide. And the third one is the information viewpoint. Okay, it's about dealing with how management information that needs to be exchanged is being represented. Okay, here's the real life example about those viewpoints. Okay, for example, for two persons to successfully conduct a business transaction or interaction with each other, uh, it is not sufficient for them to merely talk to the phone, hear their voices. That's not sufficient. In addition, they need to speak with their own language, okay, or with the same language. For example, English, okay. Uh, it serves about the communication viewpoint. Okay, about the function viewpoint, uh, They also need to know what services they can provide. For example, are you speaking to someone in a ticket office, for a theater, or for a service provider regarding internal revenue? So that's the point about function viewpoint. And lastly, about the information viewpoint, you need to be clear about, or you need to be specific on what you are talking about. Okay, if you want to order a ticket for a play, you need the following: know the name of the play, refer to the common seating, uh, to know what seats you are buying, and have a common way to refer to the starting time. For example, 9 o'clock in the morning or 9 o'clock in the evening. So that refers about information viewpoint. So let's talk about the specific classifications of the aspects of management interoperability. So the first one is communication viewpoint. Okay, as mentioned earlier, the communication viewpoint deals with what kinds of messages are exchanged between the managers and the agents. So those messages generally constitute the core of a management protocol. Okay, so why is it not sufficient for manager and agent to simply have IP connectivity? So IP connectivity means that they can exchange IP packets. Okay, IP of course refers to the Internet Protocol, which defines basic rules that are used for all data exchanges in the Internet. In fact, IP connectivity in general is one of the prerequisites to exchange management messages. Okay, but by itself, it is not sufficient. Again, IP connectivity just ensures that manager and agent can hear each other. It does not mean that they speak the same language, okay? Let alone that they can understand each other. Okay? So some of the aspects that must be addressed in addition to establishing basic data connectivity. So some includes the following. Okay? How is a management session established? So in other words, how does a manager contact an agent to tell to him or her that it would like to manage him? Okay? And how is the agent supposed to answer to this request? How is the management session later torn down? Okay? The other one is, how does a manager need to authenticate itself to the agent? In other words, how does the agent know that the manager is indeed who he says he is? Okay? Clearly, with all the security threats that loom over the internet, you want to make sure that the configuration of your networking equipment can be modified only by those who are authorized to do so. Next is, how does a management message that carries a request identify the type of request that is being made? For example, how does the message indicate whether the manager wants to get information on the current utilization of a port versus telling the agent to reset itself? What kind of parameters need to accompany the request? Is there a separate type of request for each function? That is, does the management protocol need to be extended when new requests are to be supported? Or is the type of request identified as a parameter inside the request itself? So next is, how does the manager recognize a message as a response to the request? Okay. The same question that follows is, how will the manager know that a message that the agent later sends it is a response to this particular request, as opposed to a response to another request or to an unrelated, unsolicited message? So it just determines about the situation of giving back or taking back the response. Okay. So in addition to the messages themselves, certain rules that govern their interchange need to be defined. For example, consider what is to have in situations such as the following. First is, how is the agent supposed to react if two messages that seemingly contain the same request are received? So, is the second message to be rejected and a separate error response to be sent? Is it sufficient to ignore the second request and simply send one response, or should the same request be carried out a second time? So there's some questions that might be need to take and apply to. Okay. The next one is, who can initiate the tearing down of a management session? Okay. Effectively, this means that a manager is logged out and any system resources that are reserved at the agent to service the manager are released. No more event messages will be sent to the manager, nor the management requests be accepted until a new management session is established. So, is this the responsibility of the manager, or can the agent tear down the session as well? Okay. What happens when an agent receives a request to tear down a management session, but there are still outstanding requests to be served? Okay. Should the session be torn down immediately, or should response still be sent? So it makes the point. Okay. Next one. So what should happen when a response to a management request is not received after a certain amount of time? So should the same request be sent a second time? Should a new request be issued? Can the manager find out whether the first request has actually been received and serviced already, but the response got lost? So, some management protocols define additional aspects, such as what management function need to be supported. However, the communication viewpoint is at the core of any management exchange. It defines the language that manager and agent need to speak. So much as in real life, a successful interaction between different parties requires more than just speaking the same language. For example, managers and agents need to have the same understanding of the domain they are talking about. Just because a medical doctor and a hardware engineer both speak English does not mean that one will understand the other when explaining a medical diagnosis or a technical detail in integrated circuit design. So, that is a different problem, and hence a different aspect of management interoperability.